Thank you all for having me. Excited to be here with you all today to talk about innovation. And if you hear that word innovation and you think that it's kind of a cliche, sort of general, overused buzzword, you're not wrong. You're not wrong about that. I do think innovation gets thrown around too much. I do think innovation can be kind of general. I think it means different things to just about everybody who uses it. But for the sake of our conversation today, and from what I learned during my 10 years at Google, where I taught innovation philosophy, all innovation means is change. Innovation is how we as leaders adapt to change, how we embrace change, and how we drive change in everything that we do. And I imagine that probably every single person in this room, every one of you, would probably like to believe that you're open to change, that you embrace new ideas and new ways of thinking and new approaches, new processes, new technology. We all want to believe that about ourselves, but our human nature says the opposite. Our human nature hates change. Our human nature sees new things, and it tells us inside our hearts to judge those things and to resist those things. Our human nature is what makes us all so subconsciously comfortable with the old cliche of we do it that way because that's the way we've always done it. That's our human nature. It hates new things. And I think that's really important that we all understand that and we accept that if we're going to get past it. And if you disagree with me, if we're 2 minutes into this speech and you already think Steve's an idiot, and you think your human nature is not telling you to hate new stuff, if you don't think human nature hates all new things, then I'd ask you all to stop and think. Let's all stop and think for 5 seconds. Take 5 seconds and try to think of the last time you heard someone say something good, collectively, about Gen Z. The correct answer is never. That's never happened. No one's ever said anything good about Gen Z. We hate Gen Z. We absolutely hate them. Their work ethic, their value systems, their addiction to social media and selfies. Are there any Gen Zs in here? Y'all know we hate you, right? I mean, we don't try real hard to hide it. I mean, we can't stop bashing on these people, right? Again, work ethic, value, the way they do things, the way they see the world. The funny thing is, you could have hired me to give this speech 10 years ago, and I would have said all those exact same sentences. And then I would have said, millennials, we hate millennials. Millennials are the worst. And 20 years ago, and 30 years ago, and 40 years ago, I could have said virtually the same things about the work ethic and the value systems and the priorities of Gen X and Gen Y and boomers and baby boomers. Aristotle, 2,500 years ago, said young people today think they know everything, and they're always so sure about it. We always hate what comes next. We always hate new, we always hate change. We always judge change because it looks different. And that's where our human nature takes over. And the challenging thing, I think, for business leaders like all of you, are these personal feelings we have towards new and towards change. They don't just sit in our heads, they impact the way we see the world. They impact the way we run our businesses, the way we see our customers, the way we see our organizations and our teams. And that can be a real challenge. So I want to start today with a video. I want to show you all a video of what this looks like in practice, what it looks like in real time when our human nature takes over as we look at the world and see change. Are there any baseball fans in here? Ooh, this is a good baseball crowd. That's exciting. As we are here in Philadelphia, any Phillies fans? Yeah, I'm actually from Philadelphia originally, so go Phillies. So I want to show you a video from a Major League Baseball game. This is from an Arizona Diamondbacks game from a few years ago, where the announcers for the Arizona Diamondbacks, who work in the baseball industry, their product is baseball games. That's what they do. That's what they know. They look around at the world and see change. And they see new. They see new consumer behaviors, new attitudes, new priorities, and they see new technologies. And I want to show you what happens as their human nature takes over, as it does for all of us, and how they react to change. Oh, hold on. I'm going to get it to work. Hold on.
I mean, look at the one on the right.
Do you have to make faces when you take selfies?
Wait, one more now.
Oh, there you go.
Better angle.
I love that noise. Ooh, 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 ooh.
Oh, check it. Did that come out okay?
That's the best one of the 300 pictures I've taken of myself today.
Every girl in the picture is locked into her phone.
Oh, Lord.
Every single one is dialed in. Welcome to parenting in 2015. They're all just completely transfixed by the technology.
Let's go back to the game for one pitch.
David Peralta.
Let's make fun of those girls some more.
Oh, hold on. I'd take a selfie with the hot dog. Selfie with the churro. Selfie just of a selfie.
I can't even get my phone to take pictures.
Live TV.
Took a picture of your thumb last week. That was good.
Here's my first bite of the churro. Here's my second bite of the churro.
You know, the beauty of baseball is you can sit next to your neighbor and have a conversation, or you can just completely ignore them.
All right, this is the last part. Try to listen close here because this is a good part.
Knocks it into center. David tonight 2 for 2. A leadoff single here in the fourth. And nobody noticed.
Leadoff single here in the fourth, and nobody noticed. Okay. Fun video. I love that video. Here's what I'd now like you to do. I'd like you to close your eyes, and I would like you to picture the two people you just heard talking, the announcers for the Arizona Diamondbacks. Picture them in your heads. What do they look like? Who are? Let's say their demographics, age, race, gender, all that kind of stuff. Does everybody kind of have a picture in their heads? Everybody sort of got it? You're right. You're right. Do I need to say it? 50-year-old white guy? Who had 50-year-old white guy? Everybody? Of course. Of course they're 50-year-old white guys. And nothing wrong with 50-year-old white guys. I'm going to be a 50-year-old white guy at some point. But not only are these 50-year-old white guys, these are 50-year-old white guys who have worked in, been a part of, and loved Major League Baseball for their entire lives. You know what Major League Baseball doesn't need any more of? 50-year-old white guys who have loved baseball their entire lives. They have all of them. They have every single one of them. You know what Major League Baseball really needs more of? 19-year-old girls that want to go to baseball games. You know what Major League Baseball really needs more of? People that want to go to baseball games and take pictures and videos and put it up on TikTok and Snapchat and TikTok and Instagram. Every girl in this picture bought a ticket to this game. Almost every girl is wearing a baseball shirt. Almost every girl bought the overpriced concessions they sell at the stadium so they could take their picture of the first bite of the churro and the second bite of the churro. These are the greatest customers Major League Baseball could dream up. They couldn't imagine better customers than these 8 young women. But it looks weird. It looks funny. It looks strange to us, the announcers who have been doing this for decades. We know how this product's supposed to work. We know how customers are supposed to interact. They're supposed to see it the way we see it. Because my human nature tells us that the old way of doing things, my way of doing things, is right. So the new way, the change, must be wrong. The old way is better. The new way must be worse. And the challenge Major League Baseball faced, I think it's represented by this video, is something so many organizations face when it comes to innovation, when it comes to embracing change. And it's very simply that Major League Baseball has been wildly successful for like 150 years. Even as baseball interest goes down, baseball makes billions of dollars a year. These guys are good at what they do. They're successful. They know how to do it. And for so many of us, on the teams we're on, the jobs we're in, the organizations we're a part of, we know how to do our job. I'm good at my job. We're good at this. Our chamber is successful. Our chamber is productive. For so many people, for so many organizations, part of the death of innovation is when we feel like we're already good enough. When things are good enough. We don't innovate unless we feel like we have to. And that's backwards. We should be innovating when times are good. We should be changing and embracing and evolving and growing the things we're already good at. But it's hard to do, and it's easier said than done. And so much of this conversation we're going to have about change and about innovation is ultimately a question. It's about what are we changing towards? It's about where are we going? The theme for this, or the slogan or theme or whatever you want to call it for this event here today, is invent the future. That's a fun idea, invent the future. That's exciting. But the problem is the future is very vague. The future is very uncertain. I don't think any of us really know what 2030 or 2040 are going to look like. So I want to use that as an opportunity to get to know you all a little better as we talk about change, as we figure out what we're innovating towards, what inventing the future could mean. So I'm going to ask you all some questions. We're going to do some votes with shows of hands. I want to know what you all think about innovation and about change and about the future. And we're going to start that conversation by talking about this spaceship. Who can tell me the name of this spaceship? Thank you, the Millennium Falcon. If you don't know, this is the spaceship from Star Wars. Who knows how fast the Millennium Falcon did the Kessel Run? Who said 12 parsecs? So kind of the nerdy section over here. 12 under 12 parsecs technically, right? Is that what it was? For the rest of us, it's really fast. In all sci-fi stories and movies you've probably ever heard, the spaceships have this loosely explained ability to hit some button or flip some lever. Han Solo says, punch it, Chewie, and he flips a thing, and all of a sudden the stars are like whizzing past the spaceship. They call it light speed in Star Wars. And I think what they're talking about, fair assumption, they're traveling at the speed of light. I think that's what light speed means. Does anybody know how fast the speed of light is? We know how fast the Millennium Falcon did the Kessel Run, but we don't know. It's 670 million miles per hour. That's how fast Chewbacca's flying. 670 million miles per hour. So I said I want to know what you all think about the future. I would like to know, by a show of hands, who thinks that one day, could be 5 years, could be 50 years, could be 5,000 years, that it's possible that humans could invent machines that travel at the speed of light. Who thinks that's possible? I'm going to say I've got 2/3 of the room. Okay, about 2/3 of you are with me on 670 million miles per hour. When you talk about Star Wars, it's only fair you also have to talk about Star Trek. The great technology in Star Trek to transport people, move them around. They stand on these platforms. Somebody says, beam me up, Scotty. And I don't know how it works. Lasers like take apart their molecules and turn it into energy and send it over the airwaves. And suddenly you're standing on a different planet or a different spaceship. Teleporters, transporters. Who thinks one day, as we develop artificial intelligences and robotics and thousands of years from now, that humans might invent actual teleporters? Is that possible? Okay, we've lost some hands. I'm going to say maybe 15% of you, at the most 10 to 15%. Or we'll do one more. We'll do one more example from the greatest science fiction movie of all time, which is, this isn't like an opinion-based thing, this is a fact-based question. What was it? You want to say that a little louder? Back to the Future. Nice, very good. The most common guess to that question is Spaceballs. I don't know why, but people yell Spaceballs all the time when I ask that question. And it is a good movie, but it surprises me that it gets yelled as frequently as it does. Now, unlike teleporters and speed of light travel, time machines aren't that complicated. I'm no scientist, but I've got a pretty good idea of how to invent a time machine. All you need is a flux capacitor. You need 1.21 gigawatts of electricity. You get a DeLorean, you go 88 miles per hour, and bam, right? You're 30 years in the past, you're 50 years in the future. It's not that hard. So who thinks one day, in the near future, in the distant future, humans could invent literal time machines? I'm going to say we got maybe 30 people. Not very many of you, 5% at the most. So we lost some hands. Okay, we got about 66% for speed of light, maybe 15% for teleporters, maybe 3% for time machines. Let's do something different. Let's stop thinking about inventing the future. Let's stop looking way ahead. Let's go backwards. Does anybody know when ACCE was founded? Anybody know? I often forget when I ask this question. I'm not good at remembering numbers sometimes. So I don't know if you can see in the bottom right corner of my slide, there's a little 14. That's my little cheat sheet. It was started in 1914. 1914. So I'd like you all to imagine that instead of sitting here in 2025, that you're at the first ever meeting of the Association of Chamber of Commerce Executives. And let's assume that innovation was just as much of a cliche corporate buzzword back then as it was now. And you're sitting in this room, and there's a guy like me on stage talking about innovation, except he can't talk about Star Wars and Star Trek and Back to the Future. So he has to describe other technologies. So the speaker says this: who thinks one day this could be possible? I'll have this thing one day. It'll be the size of my hand. And I can aim it at my face, and I can do a stupid dance. And instantly, billions of people in Africa and Asia and Europe will be able to see the dumb dance I just did. And on the same little thing that's only as big as my hand, I can watch the dumb little dances of billions, literally billions of other people around the world describing TikTok. And then said, who thinks one day this could be possible? And I know it's probably hard to imagine what 1914 was like. So how would you feel hearing that in 1914? So, you know, like the cutting edge technology around then, sort of the invention that was sweeping the nation around 1914 was the ice cream cone. So that's where we are technology-wise. So you're in this room, and half of you are eating ice cream cones because you're like trendsetters. And the other half of you just have, you know, fists full of ice cream, and you're just liking it. And the guy on stage describes TikTok and says, who thinks one day that could be possible? How many hands do you think go up? I think it's 0. I think it's probably zero. I think not one person in that room 3-4 generations ago would have thought something as ubiquitous as a smartphone app would be possible in the future. Yet 66% of the people in this room told me they think one day humans might travel at 670 million miles per hour. In this room today, time machines are more realistic than 4 generations ago people would have thought of a smartphone app. That's crazy. We live in a wild, weird, interesting, crazy, exciting time. It's why I love innovation, because we truly don't know where we're going. We truly don't know what's possible. We truly don't know what we or our species or our company or our industry, what we can accomplish, what we can invent, what we can discover. It's exciting. This is a cool time to be a leader in a business. But of all the lessons I learned during the time I spent at Google teaching innovation, and it's been reinforced in the last 7 years I've spent doing this, traveling around the world, talking to all sorts of different industries about innovation and artificial intelligence and consumer behavior. And all that time, what I found is that the most innovative organizations and the most innovative individuals, they have one very clear thing in common. One sort of common thread between them. And that common thread has absolutely nothing to do with technology. It's nothing to do with technological proficiency. And it's not about big, crazy inventions or scientific breakthroughs. It's not about time machines. It's not about teleporters. What the most innovative groups have in common is the attitude we just talked about. This anything is possible mindset that lets us raise our hand when we talk about teleporters. The most innovative organizations, they take that mindset and they apply it to everything. Not just big, crazy sci-fi stuff, not just time machines. They apply that anything is possible mindset to the boring, routine, mundane tasks they have to do every day, the stuff we take for granted every day. An innovative mindset means that just because I don't know a better way to send emails or to do expense reporting or to write the agenda for my weekly staff meeting, just because I don't know a better way to do those things, just because I've been doing those things the same way for years and years, doesn't mean a better way isn't possible. Anything is possible. Innovation is about questioning everything, looking to improve on everything. And even at a place like Google, innovation never starts with technology. It starts with people, and it starts with leaders. It comes from a culture of open-mindedness and collaboration and curiosity. And today what I want to talk to you about is how to build that culture within your organizations. So we're going to talk about 3 things. This is not going to be super complicated. 3 things I'd like you all to remember and like you all to try to do. 3 principal building blocks for an innovative culture. Look for innovation everywhere, prioritize iteration and feedback, and embrace passions, curiosities, and skills. 3 things. Sound good? You're with me? We're still awake? All right, let's do it. Let's start with look for innovation everywhere. So I talked about teaching innovation while I was at Google, innovation philosophy and strategy. How that started for me, what I was first asked to do, was to speak to large groups of new employees. During orientation week, I'd come in and I'd talk sort of about Google's philosophy and culture towards change and towards new ideas and towards innovation. I'd speak to these big rooms full of marketers and engineers and accountants, and it would be my job to remind them that their jobs weren't just marketing and engineering and accounting. It was marketing and innovation. It was engineering and innovation. It was accounting and innovation. At Google, it was made very clear to us on day one, and I was one of the people making it clear, that innovation was everyone's job. There was no mysterious, magical innovation team at Google that was responsible for like the crazy ideas and the what's next and the asking the critical questions. That was everyone's job. It was an expectation from day one that you ask the critical questions, that you come up with the weird idea, that you think outside the box, regardless of what your day job is. And that might sound easy or obvious, but it's not. It's a lot harder than it sounds. So I want to share a couple stories real quick of some organizations and individuals who got this right and what we can learn from sort of how they did it. And we'll start with one from outside Google. I'll tell you a story about this guy. His name is Richard Montanez. He was the son of Mexican immigrants. He was born in a small town outside Los Angeles. His entire family picked grapes for a living. That's how they made their money. He dropped out of high school, couldn't really read and write in English. But one day in the 70s, he had the opportunity to apply for a job to be a janitor at a Frito-Lay factory. And it was a big deal because that job would pay 3 times what he made picking grapes. He had someone help him with the application because he didn't really read and write English very well, but he got the job. And for years, he worked as a janitor at a Frito-Lay factory in California. But then the 80s roll around, and in the late 80s, Frito-Lay wasn't doing very well. They were having some tough times, a couple tough years, a couple tough quarters. So the CEO of Frito-Lay, knowing that innovation comes from everywhere, decided to record a video of himself and asked it to be distributed to every office, every warehouse, every factory. And in that video, the CEO simply said, I want all of you to feel like owners of this company. I want you to feel as much joy in its successes and as much pain in its struggles. I want you to bring all of yourself to work. I want to hear your ideas. I want to hear your voice. I want to listen to your questions. This is your company too. I need your help. And the video got sent to all the offices and all the factories. Now, Richard Montanez, he saw the video. And with no formal education, he didn't know that it's a little bit strange for a factory janitor to pick up the phone and call the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. So that's what he did. Got through to the administrative assistant. She put him through to the CEO. CEO says, you saw the video, you got an idea? Great. I'm going to be out in California in a couple months. Why don't you, Richard, factory janitor, why don't you put together a little presentation and come share it with me and my leadership team, and we'll listen to it. So Richard goes home. He rents a little book on marketing from the library, memorizes a few sentences he could say to sound smart. He buys a $3 clip-on tie, and he gets 100 little plastic Ziploc bags, doodles a logo on them that he came up with, and then he goes into the kitchen. Because his idea, his innovation, his inspiration, his feeling of what it would be like to own Frito-Lay was that they don't have any products that speak to the traditional tastes he grew up with. Mexican street food, Hispanic flavors, spicier flavors. So he goes in and he shares his idea with the CEO, and today we have Flaming Hot Cheetos, which Adweek will tell you was the most popular snack food in America for like 5 of the last 10 years in a row. Multiple billions of dollars from this product, from a janitor who shared his idea with the CEO. And it's a really cool story. Richard Montanez is a very inspirational guy. He went on to become an executive vice president at PepsiCo, one of the biggest companies in the world. But my takeaway from this story isn't about Richard. My takeaway from this story is about the CEO of Frito-Lay, a leader of a major company who was humble enough to say, I don't have all the answers. I might be the CEO, but I do not have all the answers. And if you've got an idea that's better than mine, I want to hear it. And I'm going to take it seriously. A CEO that when they got a phone call from a janitor, he took the phone call. And when the janitor said, I got an idea, the CEO said, great, ideas are valuable. I'll take the meeting. I'll schedule a meeting with you. Innovation comes from everywhere. I think it sounds like an obvious idea. I think this sounds like, of course, who cares where an idea comes from? If it's a good idea, it's a good idea. But really stop and think about your organization. Stop and think about the companies you work with. Think of your youngest employee, your most junior employee, your lowest level employee. If they had some big idea, a weird idea, an outside the box idea, an idea that had absolutely nothing to do with their daily job, what would they do with it? There is a very real cost, a tangible economic cost to good ideas sitting in people's heads because they don't feel safe sharing it, because they don't know how to share it. They don't know who to share it with. And that starts with leaders, and it starts with culture. All the Frito-Lay CEO had to do was send out an email telling people he was serious about this, a video saying, I'm serious about this, to start to change that culture, to encourage people to voice their opinions. It sounds easy, it sounds obvious, you'll be shocked by how many good ideas and thoughtful questions and inspirations are sitting in your coworkers' heads, your vendors' heads, your partners' heads, because they don't know that anybody wants to hear it. And it's not even just our teammates and our employees. Think about innovation coming from everywhere, looking for innovation everywhere. We have to look beyond the scope of where we'd usually look. I'll tell you a story about this guy. Everybody know who this is? Jeff Bezos. I like this picture because he looks particularly like Lex Luthor, I think, with his folded hands. So everybody know what Amazon launched in the early 1990s. Everybody know what they sold when they first launched? Books. Does anybody know the second thing Amazon sold? 2 years in, they started selling a second thing. Y'all know what it was? No? It was like movies and music, DVDs, CDs, media, basically. And the reason they did that is because it was packaged very similar to books. Could fit on the same shelves in the same crates, all that sort of stuff. But then around 1997, Jeff Bezos thinks we should expand to a third category. But he has no idea what it should be. He thinks innovation comes from everywhere, so he says, I'm not just going to use my own ideas, I'm not just going to use my employees' ideas. He writes an email, and he sends it to 1,000 random Amazon customers. 1,000 people get an email from Jeff Bezos in 1997, and it simply says, what do you wish you could buy on Amazon? And hundreds of them reply, and Jeff Bezos sits down and reads the replies. And there's one email, and he'll talk about it to this day as one of, if not the most important email of his life. One person responded, "What do you wish you could buy on Amazon?" Somebody said, "Windshield wiper blades, because right now my car needs new windshield wiper blades." That was it. That was it. That random little half-thought-through idea was the trigger in Jeff Bezos' mind that people would buy anything online. That e-commerce is a solution to real-time needs. It's not about the thing, it's about what you need right now. We at Amazon should sell everything. Because he asked for help, and one random person said windshield wiper blades. At its core, windshield wiper blades is an absolutely awful idea. It just is. If in 1998 you go to Amazon to buy your books, your DVDs, and your windshield wiper blades, it'd be the weirdest website anyone's ever seen. But Jeff Bezos took in as much input as he could, as much thoughts as he could, and he filtered it through his knowledge, through his mastery of e-commerce, through his expertise, through his training, through his education. A half-baked idea is better than no idea. A bad idea is better than no idea. A crazy idea said out loud is more valuable and more productive to the best idea that you keep secret. I can build off a bad idea. I can be inspired by a crazy thought. The more inputs we get, the more suggestions we get, the more feedback we get from wherever we can get it is valuable. All we have to do is ask for it. All we have to do is look for it. All we have to do is share it. And I'll tell one last story, and we'll do one from Google. Who uses Google Maps? Any weirdos? Apple Maps? Okay. Suspicious of those people. So Google Maps launched in 2005, very quickly became the most used mapping software in the world. But even at Google, with all the money and all the engineers that Google's thrown around with the most popular mapping software in the world, about 3.5 years into Google Maps dominance in 2008, summer of 2008, Google was still having a lot of trouble mapping certain areas, third world countries, really rural communities, developing nations where things changed quickly. We just weren't good at it. We couldn't fill in the details. This is a map from Pakistan and the Philippines from 2008. That's what it looked like on Google Maps. But Google, like I said, we know that innovation comes from everywhere. And that doesn't just mean us. It doesn't just mean our customers. It doesn't just mean people who think like us and look like us and talk like us. In fact, there's a tremendous amount of value in finding inputs and feedback and ideas from people who think totally different from the way we think, who don't have our perspective and our knowledge and our skill set. So what Google said is we need other perspectives. We need knowledge we don't have, that our engineers don't have. So they built something called the Google MapMaker API. It was a platform that people in local communities could log into and change the maps themselves. Not engineers, not coders, but people who had local expertise and language expertise and knew their communities better than we ever could. And in 3.5 years, this is how far we got on these maps. And in a few weeks, and in a few months, that was the difference. 6 weeks to change that town in Pakistan, 5 months to change that town in the Philippines, after Google, with the highest paid engineers in the world, worked on it for 3.5 years. We needed different perspectives. We needed people who could see things we didn't see and think the ways we didn't think. I talk about innovation comes from everywhere, and I can't mean that more literally. You will be surprised and shocked if you get more comfortable talking about your work, talking about your challenges, your opportunities, the things you're trying to solve for, the issues you're facing. If you get more comfortable talking about that with more people, the people in this room, absolutely, but your friends, your family, on LinkedIn, anywhere, you'd be surprised at how many people might have thoughts or questions or ideas or a different perspective that could add value to your process. Don't just look for inspiration. Don't just look for ideation from people who look and think like you. You already look and think like you. Find others. Find other perspectives. So I want to end each of these 3 sections with a first step. I'm going to say a lot of things today that I think everyone's going to agree with. I don't think I'm going to say anything where people are going to be like, this doesn't make sense. I think you're going to agree with this stuff. But the question will be when you go home at the end of this week, will you do anything differently? And if you want to take a baby step, if you want to know, Steve, I like this stuff. If I want to go home and get started in 3 minutes, how do I get started? What's the first step? Here it is. Write an email to your team or to your partners or to your members, your companies, whoever it is. You can tell them about this speech if you want like sort of a jumping off point. I just saw this speech on innovation in Philadelphia. It was so great. Tell them that moving forward, if they have any ideas or thoughts or suggestions, you'd love to hear them. Tell them the ideas can be random, they can be weird, they can be half-baked, unrealistic, unaffordable, and most importantly, it's okay if they have nothing to do with their particular role and responsibilities. Then reiterate it the next time you talk to these people in person, then send a reminder email a week later, mention it at the next team meeting, make sure they know you're serious. I talk a lot about innovation culture. It's about changing the culture of your teams and your organization, and how you do that is by letting them know as leaders you're serious about this. Take the 3 minutes, send the email. It will not cost you anything, and maybe there's a flaming hot Cheetos sitting out there. Number 2. This is my favorite one, prioritize iteration and feedback. I work for myself now. I do speeches and I do consulting, and as an individual person, even outside of Google, outside of leadership roles, I use these principles more than anything else when I'm trying to evolve, when I'm trying to innovate. And at Google, this concept, you can kind of split it in two, the iteration part and the feedback part. And the first part, iteration, it always makes me think of this. This is the first ever Google homepage. This is what Google looked like in 1998. A lot of people don't remember. It used to have an exclamation point. A little uglier, a little cluttered. But what I'd like you to look at is right under the search bar. I don't know if you can see it. It says index contains 25 million pages, soon to be much bigger. Now, I don't remember 1998 super well. I was 10 in 1998. But I imagine that in 1998, a website being able to organize 25 million resources like that was probably mind-blowingly impressive. Truly, truly innovative, cutting-edge technology. It is probably every bit the ice cream cone of its time, just blowing people's minds. But right there on their one and only product with 25 million pages, the Google guys said, soon to be much bigger. And to me, this was the first example of Google doing something that I think totally changed the course of the company. They labeled their product, in my mind, version 1. They said, this is version 1. Soon to be much bigger means there's going to be a version 2, and a version 3, and a version 4. We're telling you right now, we're committed to this right now. Does anybody want to guess how many pages are in Google's index now? I actually couldn't find data from very recently. The last time I found Google sharing it was 2016. So it's probably grown a lot since 2016. But in the 18 years, from 1998 to 2016, it went from 25 million pages. Can I get a couple guesses? What was that? 1 billion? What was that? A billion? Come on. Trillion? 130 trillion. 130 trillion. That's something like 17,000 web pages per person on the planet. That's what it was in Google's index by 2016. This doesn't happen if in 1998, the founders of Google say index contains 25 million pages. Yes, we did it. We're awesome. We are the best at search. Everybody cheer for us. We nailed it. We're going to do something else now because, we nailed it. We're so smart. That doesn't happen. This doesn't happen if that happens. Instead, they said this is version 1. At innovative organizations, everything you do, from product to process, everything you do should carry the label version 1. Labeling something version 1 pushes us. It forces us to think critically, to analyze, to ask questions about things we would otherwise take for granted. Version 1 is the fuel that pushes us away from that cliche of we do it that way because that's the way we've always done it. As soon as we label something version 1, from the big, huge strategies we're working on, the products we're developing, to the tiny daily processes we go through, as soon as we label it version 1, we're opening up our minds to the possibility of looking for better, of looking for faster, of looking for more efficient. Everything should start on version 1. Now, the other part of this prioritize iteration and feedback, how we determine what does version 2 look like, where do we go, it comes from this idea of feedback. And when I think about feedback, I often think about this guy. Does anyone know who this is? Tony Robbins. Probably the most famous motivational speaker of all time, also famous for having gigantic fingers. It's like the two things he's famous for. Most famous speaker of all time, gigantic fingers. And he's got this story he used to tell about before he became famous motivational speaker Tony Robbins. He used to have a sales job. And in that job, he regularly had to give sales presentations. And ironically, for the most famous motivational speaker of all time, he was really bad at it. Always got poor customer reviews, poor reviews from his peers, poor scores on his performance reviews from his managers. He wasn't good at sales pitches. But as you can imagine, for famous motivational speaker Tony Robbins, he was very motivated. He wanted to get better. So he went to his boss and said, you know what, boss? Start sending me out on 3 times as many pitches. I want to just do this and do this and do this because I want to master it. I want to be the best at this. I'm motivated. I'm hardworking. I'm Tony Robbins. So he does. And for months, he's going out on pitch after pitch after pitch, 3 times what he used to do. And then after those months of doing this, he comes back. And he sits down with his manager, and they get all the customer reviews and all the peer reviews and all the performance reports, and they add up all the surveys and all the numbers. His scores were exactly the same. Exactly the same. And that's when he said, and this is one of my favorite quotes of all time, he said, that's when I realized that practice doesn't make perfect. Practice makes consistent. Practice plus feedback makes perfect. Tony Robbins got really good at doing things the way he did them. Practice doesn't make perfect. Practice makes consistent. Practice plus feedback makes perfect. Practice plus feedback makes perfect. When innovation is done right at any organization, it is not an individual endeavor. It's about getting as many inputs, as much feedback, as many ideas, and getting them as quickly as possible, as early in the process as possible, and then using that information to figure out how to move forward. That's what innovation is supposed to look like. And one of my favorite examples of sort of how this came to life at Google was from this product. Does anybody remember these? Does anybody know what these are called? I hear some whispers. Google Glass. Did anyone in here ever own a pair of Google Glass? Am I not seeing all the hands? Nobody. Anybody ever try on a pair of Google Glass? Okay. 9? All right. So if you're wondering if Google Glass was a huge commercial hit, no, it wasn't. If you're not familiar with them, it was a product Google launched around 2012, I believe. It was essentially the first real foray the world has ever seen into true augmented virtual reality, smart wearable technology. The precursor to everything you see now with the Apple Vision Pro and the Meta Quest and the Ray-Ban stuff. There were smart glasses, RoboCop glasses. They had a little LCD screen. You could interact with your voice and your hand motions. Super cool, super innovative. Obviously not a big commercial hit, but we'll come back to that. So here's what I want to know. Keeping in mind Google's embrace of iteration and feedback and how we see innovation. When someone walked into the Google X team, that's the team who built this, they're called Google X, and pitched this idea, they said, hey, you know what? I think we should build like augmented reality RoboCop classes. How long do you think it took till that team had a working, wearable prototype? Something you could actually put on your face and wear. How long do you think it took? I need some guesses. Come on, be brave and be loud. 2 years, 6 months, 1 week, 4 years? It was 45 minutes. 45-minute version of Google Glass. I know it's not a great picture. This is the oldest picture I can find of the earliest version of Google Glass. But in 45 minutes, they whipped something together. It looks like a laptop in a book bag with cords running to what I can only assume is a phone taped onto some racquetball goggles. I mean, it's crazy looking. It's nonsensical. But there's a reason they did this in 45 minutes. And it comes back to feedback and to iteration. Quite simply put, this was a weird outside-the-box idea. And as quickly as possible, Google wanted to get that idea out of that person's head and into a format where everyone else could know what they're talking about. Everyone else could try it, could touch it, could experience it, could think about it. They don't want one person building this idea. They don't want one person developing this idea for months and years. They want a team of people giving feedback immediately to figure out what's next. They don't want to do what Tony Robbins did and spend months of the one person doing it their way. In 45 minutes, they got feedback on a wildly outside-the-box idea. And of course, it changed over time, and over months and months and years, there was version 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6, and ultimately, not a lot of people bought it. Didn't really work out. Does anybody know, I think this was part of the reason not a lot of people bought it. I was working at Google's headquarters at the time, which is out near San Francisco. Does anybody know what people called people who wore Google Glass, like out to bars and stuff, which was mostly just Google employees wearing them? Anybody know? It's a very affectionate term. We were called glass holes. That was the term the media ran with. So yeah, not a big hit. Not a big hit. But the thing about iterating, the thing about feedback is that even if you land on version 30 that you're selling, and even if version 30, your final version, isn't a success, there are ultimately plenty of successes along that road. There are things you learn, there are things you master, there are things you develop, and they take their own offshoots and go on their own paths and provide their own feedback. You hear that cliche all the time of like fail fast or fail well or learn from your failures. And those are all true. And when you're going from version to 1 to whatever, there are things you learn along the way. Because along this process, even though the product ended up not being a hit, there were successes. And part of the successes was that in 2012, Google had more knowledge, more expertise, more data, more reporting, more statistics on artificial intelligence and virtual reality and augmented reality than anywhere else in the world. Better engineers on augmented reality than anywhere else in the world because they worked on the early versions of this product. So we found other ways to use those early versions. They took their own paths. At the time, there was another team within Google who also wanted to use augmented reality, except they wanted to use it to make games. They were called Niantic Labs. Google has since spun them out to be their own company, with Google as kind of the major shareholder. But they took a lot of those engineers, and they took a lot of that data, and they took a lot of that research. Does anybody know what Niantic Labs used all those early versions and data and research of Google Glass to make? Anybody? Pokemon Go, which last year passed $8 billion in revenue. I didn't say that wrong. Pokemon Go has made $8 billion so far. It's pretty good. From the failed bones of Google Glass that no one in this room decided to buy, from glass holes. That's pretty good. You save what you save, you take what you take. And there's a very real cost when we get this stuff wrong. When we get this stuff wrong, it can be hugely detrimental. When we see the feedback, when we hear the ideas, when we see the change, when we identify version 2, but we don't do anything about it. When I go back to what I said at the beginning, when we're comfortable, when things are good. This is a website called OPhoto. Anybody remember the website OPhoto? One maybe? People do not raise their hands much when I talk about OPhoto. It's a website that Kodak bought in 2001. In case you can't remember, in 2001 was Kodak at almost the peak of their market cap. This is Kodak while they're still the kings of photography, a very successful company with big budgets and tons of engineers. And in 2001, they bought a website that let users do 3 things. I don't know if you can read the bullets in the back. The 3 things you could do on OPhoto once Kodak rebranded it. Buy real Kodak prints, share photos online, and organize and edit your photos online. So here we are in the future with the value of hindsight. And we look back at these 3 bullets and we say, oh, Kodak had a platform that allowed people to share, organize, and edit photos online. And they had it in 2001. That sounds a lot like another company I've heard of. It sounds a lot like Instagram. And if you're wondering, here are the slogans for Kodak and Instagram. Share moments, share life. Capture and share the world's moments. 2 companies kind of trying to do the same thing. Instagram launched in 2011. Kodak, 10 years before the launch of Instagram, with the biggest brand in photography, with tons of money and tons of engineers, bought a website that does what Instagram does. But again, with the value of hindsight, and we look at these 3 bullets, we can probably guess what things consumers would want to do with this website. Bullet 2 and bullet 3. They want to share their photos online. They want to organize and edit their photos. We all know that. Again, we're in 2025. We know how the world works. Here's the problem. You know how Kodak made all its money in 2001? Buy real Kodak prints. You know how Kodak made all its money in 1991? Buy real Kodak prints. 81, 71, 61, buy real Kodak prints. So Kodak bought this website, launched this website. Consumers loved it. Consumers came to OPhoto a bunch. What did they do when they got there? They didn't buy real Kodak prints. They shared photos, and they organized and edited their photos online. Consumers loved it. And you know what Kodak thought about that? This website sucks. It's not working. It's not doing the thing that makes us the money. Our version 1 is that we make money from real Kodak prints, and that's not what this website is doing. This website is failing us. So Kodak changed it. They made it so you couldn't even do the second 2 bullets unless you bought a certain number of prints every month. So unless you bought a certain number of prints, you couldn't share your photos, you couldn't edit your photos. As you can imagine, that wasn't real popular. Website failed. People stopped coming to it. Kodak stripped it into pieces, rebranded it, sold what was left of it to Shutterfly in 2012 for $23 million. Last year, Instagram made $50 billion. And Kodak was there a decade sooner. With more money, a better brand, more engineers. In every conceivable way, Kodak was better positioned to do what Instagram did than Instagram, except for the fact that they liked version 1. And version 1 was good enough, and that was okay. It's a dangerous thing when things are good enough, when times are good enough. We hear these stories of businesses and industries that get like blindsided by some new technology. Some new trend comes out of nowhere, and it kills these once successful companies. You hear it a lot about things like taxis, right? When Uber has just totally decimated the taxi industry, right? It came out of nowhere. I was looking at some of the data on this. I found this old chart. It's like 2010 to 2019, so it's kind of old, but it's a graphic of New York City rides, taxi versus Uber and Lyft. And if you look at this chart, you can kind of understand what the taxi industry is talking about. Man, we got blindsided by Uber. Look how quickly they took over. First of all, let's say that whole blindsided, that's 3 years. It took Uber 3 years to pass taxis in New York. But Uber launched in San Francisco in 2009. It took 8 years from the time Uber launched to the time it took over for taxi rides in New York City. 8 years. And in those 8 years, as taxi industry was well aware of Uber and watched what Uber was doing, did any taxi company put GPSs in their taxis? No. Develop an app that let you pay through your phone? No. Develop a way to review drivers? No. Develop a way to track where the car is when it's coming to pick you up? No. They didn't need to. Things were good enough. Times were good enough for taxis. We're winning. They were not blindsided. They saw it coming for 8 years. But they were comfortable enough, things were good enough, so they didn't need to shift. And now they are gone. I mean, not gone, but basically gone. I don't know when the last time y'all took a taxi, but I couldn't tell you the last time I took one. It's so easy to feel that way, especially with technology. It's what's happening right now with artificial intelligence. In a couple years, some of you are going to have AI threaten your jobs, your organizations, your industries, and we're going to want to say that, oh, it came out of nowhere. But if you're not sitting in this room right now today, fully embracing artificial intelligence, if you personally are not learning to master ChatGPT or Gemini or Copilot, if you are not taking those steps right now, then you are not getting blindsided. You are failing to adapt. And you have no one to blame but yourselves if in a couple years AI kills what you do. We know it's coming. We know it's here. We see the data. We have the feedback. If you're just sitting there staying on version 1 of your organization, of your company, or just of your job, if you're staying on version 1, you have no one to blame but yourself when the world changes around you. I said I would do a first step for each of these sections. When I'm not giving speeches, a lot of what I do is workshops. I sit with leadership teams, and we do a lot of different brainstorming activities. And the most fun activity, the most useful activity, the most productive activity every time is a version 1 brainstorm. Sit down with your team sometime, with your staff, the people you work with, get some Post-it notes, a pack of paper, whatever you need, carve out 15, 20 minutes, and do a version 1 brainstorm. Basically what that means is asking everybody to spend 5 or 10 minutes coming up with as many ideas as possible of things within their job, or the team, or the organization, or the entire industry that feel like they're stuck on version 1. Then spend some time discussing those things. And whenever we talk about brainstorming, this is super crucial and important to remember. It's what we talk a lot about in these workshops. Make sure your people understand that this exercise is not about solving problems. It's about identifying them. It's about pointing to things that are worth attention, pointing to things that feel stuck on version 1. We have this natural human instinct to say, don't bring up a problem unless you have a solution. That's the death of brainstorming. As soon as you tell people they have to solve the problems they point out, they're going to stop pointing to problems. Give your people the license to say, hey, the way we do our hiring, it just feels like version 1. I don't know what version 2 is. Maybe we can talk about that together. Maybe somebody else can solve for that. But it feels like it's stale given modern technologies and modern consumers. Give your team the opportunity to point at whatever they feel like is stuck. Last one. Embrace passions, curiosities, and skills. Google has this thing that some people probably, anybody heard of 20% time or 20% projects at Google? Okay, I see some hands. So it's this idea at Google, and it doesn't always work perfectly, but in concept, all Google employees were meant to be given up to 20% of their time to work on whatever they want, whatever they think could be valuable or productive to Google, even if it's not related to your daily job. And of course, that's not replicatable by 99% of companies. It must be nice to be Google and have $1 trillion in the bank, and we can let our employees goof around one day a week and do whatever. But even though most people can't copy that, there's 2 reasons, as far as I'm concerned, that Google does this. And these reasons are things any organization can look to copy and look to achieve, even if it's not 1 day a week or 20% of your time. The 2 reasons Google does this, the first is that, well, it's obvious. If we let people work on what they want to work on, they're going to be more excited, more energized, bring more of themselves to work, be more creative, be more innovative, of course. Any opportunity we have to give ourselves or our teams the opportunity to pursue what they're interested in, passionate about, curious about, it's going to get the most out of them. The other reason Google does this is for collaboration. What ultimately happens when we let people identify their own interests, their own projects, their own things to work on, they're going to encounter other people who also have those interests, who have those passions, who have those curiosities, who want to join forces on those projects. At Google, the way this might work is maybe you have somebody from the Chrome team who loves fantasy football and wants to build a fantasy football app for Google. They share that publicly, they talk about it, they post it on message boards, and somebody from the Android team loves fantasy football, and somebody from finance, and someone from HR, and someone from search. And now we have this team of people together who never would have worked together, who never would have met, from different silos, collaborating and trying to build something together. In an ideal world, they build the best fantasy football app ever, and it makes Google tons of money. But even if they don't, they go back to their teams having learned from each other, having experienced how each other does things, the processes, the tools, the platforms, the approaches, the way they lead meetings, the way they promote things. This learning from people who, like I said earlier, don't look like us and act like us and sound like us, these people from other silos, we take that back to our teams, and that value builds. Probably my favorite example of a 20% project was this. Anybody recognize these? I see some hands. This was called Google Cardboard. Probably launched in like 2013, if I'm remembering right. Essentially, there were two engineers in Google's Paris office who felt that the future of the world, the future of content, the future of education would be in 3 dimensions, would be in virtual reality. The problem as they saw it was that in order to access virtual reality in 2012, 2013, you needed to buy like a $2,000 Oculus Rift. That meant that underprivileged communities, low-income school districts, third world countries were going to fall way behind as content developed, as education developed. And they thought it was worthwhile to solve for that. So they did a 20% project to develop this perforated sheet of cardboard that cost like pennies to make, that had 2 glass discs in it. And when you fold it along the edges, it forms a viewfinder. And you slide a smartphone in the front, and when you access certain types of 3-dimensional content, you can hold it up to your face like a viewfinder and experience it in virtual reality. We gave millions of them away for free. Really cool. I had a bunch of them, lots of fun stuff you could do with cardboard, but my favorite application was this little girl. Her name is Tegan. She was born in a Minneapolis hospital, missing a lung, and with only half of a heart. Tegan and her parents were sent home from the hospital to live her final days because this was not a surgery that anyone could do. It's not something that had been done before. The heart was more the issue than the lung. As you can imagine, Tegan's parents didn't want to accept that, and they reached out to hundreds of hospitals across the United States, begging someone to try to save their little girl. Eventually, they got their message heard by the Miami Children's Hospital, which is known for having a very innovative surgical staff. They discussed it at their weekly meeting as one of the cases they could consider taking on. It just so happened that a member of that surgical staff the week before had been given a pair of Google Cardboard by his nephew. And he theorized that if we could build a 3-dimensional model of Tegan's heart, and everyone on the surgical staff could dive into the virtual reality 3-dimensional model of that heart, if we could plan the surgery together in 3 dimensions, maybe we could save that little girl. And they did. And they saved baby Tegan because those 2 engineers decided to build a little 5-cent sheet of cardboard because they thought it would be helpful and useful to the world. There's a really cool 60 Minutes on this, and it shows like the whole surgical staff like spinning around with cardboard on their face. It's a really neat story. And I love that story, and I see the smiles, and it's warm, and it's fluffy, and it's nice. Google has like 180,000 employees. If they're going to give them 1 day a week to do whatever, it sure would be nice to make some money. We certainly didn't make money giving away millions of Google Cardboard. Other famous 20% projects include the world's most popular email, the world's most popular map. And does anybody know what AdSense is? It's the platform that lets Google put ads on websites. You don't think that makes $20-some billion a year and pays for all the other 20% projects? Gmail is probably the best example, most famous example. Early days of Google, an engineer came to Larry Page and Sergey Brin, the founders of Google. I think Larry Page is the most visionary person in the world, one of the smartest people in the world. This engineer said to Larry and Sergey, I think we should build an email platform for Google. Larry very famously said, no. Why? Why would we need it? There's so many emails already. What's the point? Why would we bother? Let's just focus on what we usually focus on. That engineer said, well, I believe in it. I'm passionate about it. And I have the option to do a 20% project. So I'm going to find other people at this company who believe in it and are passionate about it. Other people like me who think you, Larry Page, founder of Google, is wrong. And I'm going to prove it to you. And that's what he did. We as leaders, as executive directors, as CEOs, as presidents, we don't always get it right. We don't always get it right. And giving our team the opportunity to pursue the things they believe in is powerful. I said Google tries to do 1 day a week. It doesn't always work in practice. Y'all can do it an hour a month, 1 day a year. There's ways to do this. There's ways to do this that anyone can do. You'd be surprised what that means to people, giving them some small sliver of time to do what they think is interesting, to experience a part of the team or a part of the organization that they don't usually get exposure to work on something, some skill they have, some expertise they have, letting them bring that to their job. That's powerful. It means a lot to people, and it can lead to some really powerful stuff. And this 20% project thing, it's not like some new agey millennial Silicon Valley thing. 3M has had 15% culture since 1970. They've let their scientists have up to 15% of their time to work on projects they believe in, even if they don't have a commercial application. There's a really great, if you're looking for something to read later, there's a really great HBR article on this. It's called The Innovation Mindset in Action, 3M Corporation. When I read this, what struck me, what 3M does so well with their 15% time, is they give their scientists so many platforms and venues to talk about their work, to share what they're doing. Technical forums, technical councils, innovation centers, to take that thing they're passionate about, share it with other people in case someone else can help, in case someone else is interested, in case someone else has feedback or ideas. So many people have heard the story about how Post-it notes were invented, quote unquote, by accident. That's kind of true. What's definitely true, it was invented out of 15% time. There's an engineer or a scientist named Spencer Silver who designed an adhesive. He meant it to be for airplanes, but it wasn't that sticky and it was pressure sensitive. And for 5 years, he had this adhesive. For 5 years, he believed in it and was passionate about it, but had no idea what to do with it. So we talk about it at technical forums and technical councils, and 5 years of doing that, he finally gave a presentation where there was a guy in the audience from 3M named Art Fry, who just recently had decided he needs a better bookmark for his hymn book at church. And he heard that thing Spencer Silver was talking about and said, let's collaborate. I've got an idea. First steps. Create a platform, preferably in person, for you and your teams to share some of the passions, skills, expertise, experience, hidden talents, etc. that you all have. Just start learning about each other. You can find ways to apply this stuff. You can figure out if it's an hour a month or a day a year. You can figure out all that later. Go find out what your employees and your teammates are interested in. What are they curious about? What passions do they have? What skills do they have? You'll find ways to apply this stuff. You'll find ways to benefit from this stuff. But start by learning about each other. Start by sharing with each other. Identify those things. So those are my 3 points. Like I said, it's not real complicated. Like I said, I doubt you disagree with anything I said today, except maybe go Phillies. Look for innovation everywhere. Prioritize iteration and feedback. Embrace passions, curiosities, and skills. And I'm going to end you all with one last story. On that point that I think, again, I see a lot of heads nodding. I see some notes. I see people taking pictures. I heard some laughs. But ultimately, when y'all go home tomorrow or the next day or whenever it is, you have the option, you have the control, you have the choice to decide if you do anything differently. And I think a danger with innovation is that we tend to think of it as very additive. We think of it as like a bonus. We have to do what we do things our way. All this brainstorming and asking for ideas and iterating, it's like a nice to do, but I don't have to. That would be like additive. So I'll tell you a story about Walmart real quick, and we'll end. This is Doug McMillon, CEO of Walmart. This is at the Walmart Investor Conference a few years ago. One of the reasons Walmart is so successful is because of logistics. It's how they built themselves into such a successful company. They're very good, very efficient at moving things around. Part of that is the way they stack and fill and organize their warehouses and their trucks. And in order to accomplish that, every warehouse worker, every warehouse, every truck bay has access to these ladders. Very specific ladder that Walmart gives to all the warehouse workers to make sure they fill the trucks to the tippy top. The problem was the ladders Walmart provided were kind of big, they were kind of bulky, they were kind of heavy, they were kind of inconvenient, and a lot of the workers hated them, didn't even use them. They just filled the trucks as best they could without the ladders. And that went on for years and years doing it that way. But one warehouse worker who wanted to do his job well, but also hated the ladders, decided to go home, and he went into his garage and he built his own version of that ladder. A little smaller, a little lighter. I think it was like PVC and plastic. And for years, he used his own thing to fill trucks because he could do it better. Until eventually that got bubbled up. And eventually Doug McMillon gets a hold of it, the CEO of Walmart. And he brings that warehouse worker out on stage at the Walmart Investor Conference along with a new step stool that Walmart is going to manufacture using that guy's design. a smaller, lighter weight step stool. And Doug McMillon proudly says that when we distribute this to all the warehouses, Walmart's going to save $30 million a year. We're going to save $30 million a year using this guy's design for this step stool. Yay, everybody cheers, happy, clap, applause. Here's my problem with this, and it's what I said earlier about innovation being additive or feeling like it's additive. This is not how I view this story. And I understand why Doug McMillon says it that way at the Walmart Investor Conference. We're going to save $30 million a year. All I think when I read this is, for how many years did Walmart lose $30 million? Because no one bothered to ask the warehouse workers if they have any ideas. Because no one allowed the warehouse workers to collaborate with people in other silos. Because no one asked if there was a version 2 of how these people are doing their jobs. Innovation can be additive, but as I said earlier, there is a real, tangible economic cost to not taking these steps. With that, I will say thank you all very much. I appreciate it.